Have you ever looked at your zodiac sign and thought, yeah, that's sort of me, but not really? Maybe you've always felt like you sit somewhere between two signs, a little bit too Gemini for Taurus, a bit too Libra for Scorpio. Then sooner or later someone tells you, oh, you were born at the end of your sign, so that means you're a cusp. Now that sounds reassuring, like astrology is making room for nuance. The problem is, cusp signs don't actually exist, but the feeling behind them absolutely does. So in this video I'd like to explain why cusp signs feel so convincing, why astrology doesn't actually use them, but how that feeling of being more than one thing isn't in your imagination. It shows up very clearly when you look at your full birth chart.
I don't believe in all that astrology nonsense.
Really? Why not?
I'm a Virgo and we tend to be very sceptical. What are cusp signs?
So when people say they're a cusp sign, they're not talking about anything technical. What they usually mean is that they were born within a day or two of a zodiac sign changing over. So if you were born on, say, the 17th or 18th of December, you're right at the end of Sagittarius, just before Capricorn season kicks in. That often leads people to think, I was born close to the sign change and I don't fully identify with my star sign. And quite honestly, that makes sense. If you're told that the zodiac moves vaguely through the signs, it's easy to assume that being born near the edge means you're catching some kind of overlap, like there's an energetic changeover happening and you're standing right in the middle of it. The same thing happens at the start of the sign. You might be born on the 22nd or 23rd of June, so you're technically a Cancer, but when you read about Gemini you might think, yeah, I've got some of that stuff going on too. That's usually what people mean by being on the cusp. You know, like when you go out for a meal and you look at someone else's plate and think, ooh, I quite fancy some of that. In any case, I totally get it. I'm a Capricorn, and in my last video I talked about how I don't fully identify with everything my sign has got to say about me. I was born on Christmas Day, which is 3 days after the changeover. So maybe that makes me a cusp of a cusp? Anyway, there's no denying that it feels intuitive, but it still isn't how astrology works.
Cusp signs and astrology.
So what do people mean by star signs in the first place? Well, this is where a lot of the confusion begins. What newspapers, magazines and any other kind of horoscope column refer to as a star sign is actually your sun sign. This is the one that everyone knows, the one people ask you about at parties, the one you blame for making you send that text message at 3 AM when you were drunk. It ignores all the other planets and various placements, but it's caught on because it's nice and easy. 12 signs, 12 symbols, no calling your mom to find out what time you were born. Zero hassle. It works well enough for the kind of pop astrology you find in the daily newspapers, and it also creates this idea that the sun kind of fades from one sign into another. But here's the thing, in actual astrology the sun doesn't blend between the signs at the edges. Astrology uses exact degrees, so when the sun moves, it moves at a specific moment. Every sign is 30 degrees wide, and the sun moves through each degree as it works its way through, eventually getting to the end, which is when the next sign begins. So being born near a sign change doesn't mean you're in two signs, it just means you were born near the doorway. And standing near a doorway doesn't put you in two places at once. You're either in the pub or you're in the street. You don't become pub street cusp just because you're standing by the door. Get in there and order yourself a Guinness. However, none of this explains why being born at the end or the beginning of a sign feels like there's something different going on.
Why the long face, George?
Me and the wife have split up.
Oh dear, what happened?
We had an argument about astrology. It tore us apart. Why do cusps feel real?
So if cusps don't technically exist, then why do they feel so convincing? This is where astrology and human behaviour quietly drift apart. In astrology, the sun doesn't slide vaguely from one sign into the next, it changes at a precise moment, down to the minute, sometimes down to the second. The problem is that we humans don't experience time like that. We experience birthdays. We say things like, I was born on the 22nd, or I'm a late December baby, and we treat the whole day like one big zodiac soup. Astrology doesn't do that, it cares very deeply about the exact time you were born. Two people can be born on the same calendar date, in the same hospital, even in the same delivery ward, and still have different sun signs. One arrives before the sun changes, the other arrives after. Same dates on their driving licenses, but different zodiac signs. One likes death metal, the other thinks Michael Bublé is a bit too intense.
One likes turnips.
And the other one likes it when your finger goes through the toilet paper and makes a little brown ballerina. What?
Anyway, this is where the cusp idea sneaks in, because if you've never looked at your full chart, all you've really got to go on is the date. Astrologically, the sun moves roughly through 1 degree per day. Near the end of a sign, it's at the final degrees. Early in the next sign, it's at the first degrees. These positions can feel transitional, like they're not fully settled. All that means is that you're at the edge of a cycle, and edges tend to be psychologically loud. So cusps feel real because we compress time into birthdays and weeks and seasons, while astrology works in minutes and degrees and exact positions. Or to put it another way, astrology cares about precision. Humans care about birthday cake, and that's where the confusion lives. It's human nature to look at the zodiac as dates, labels and vibes, but right now I think it's time to look at it the way astrologers actually use it. But just before I do that, I'd like to say a quick thank you to our friends at Otter Spirit, who make beautifully designed gemstone jewellery inspired by astrology. They've got a full collection for each zodiac sign, so if you'd like to keep these energies with you throughout the day and look stylish while you're at it, please check out otterspirit.com. There's a link in the description and you can get a 20% discount with the code KIPPY20. Anyway, let's get back to the video.
One small part of a very big chart.
So you're probably aware that in astrology, everybody has a natal chart that is unique to that person. If you haven't got a chart, then you should totally get one. They're free on cafeastrology.com, and I talked about what you need to do in this video here. Seriously, seeing my chart turned me from a skeptic into an enthusiast. By the way, this isn't my chart, it's the Fool's. I feel a bit funny about putting my own chart up on YouTube.
But you're happy to show everyone mine?
Yeah. Anyway, the part that always gets missed in your daily horoscope is that your sun sign is only one aspect of your chart. You've also got a moon sign, a rising sign, Mercury, Venus, Mars, a chart ruler, and all sorts of other things going on. Most people don't fully relate to their sun sign because they're not supposed to. When someone says, I'm a Libra but I'm on the cusp so I really relate to Scorpio, the chances are that Scorpio is already doing quite a bit of heavy lifting in their chart. Maybe they've got Mars in Scorpio, which brings intensity, emotional depth, and a very all or nothing way of going after things, even if their sun sign looks diplomatic on the surface. They could have Mercury in Scorpio, so they think deeply, read between the lines, and communicate in a more guarded way than a textbook breezy Libra. Maybe they've got Venus in Scorpio, which makes relationships intense, loyal, and emotionally serious, rather than light and flirtatious. At that point, you don't need to be on the cusp of Scorpio because your chart's already got loads of it going on. And that's before we even look at houses and where these things show up in your life. So if you do get your chart done, there's a very strong chance that you'll look at it and say, ah, now that is starting to make sense. Once you get that kind of insight, the idea of being a cusp starts to fall apart. The closest you could ever get to what people are trying to describe here is if all of your planets are positioned within two neighbouring signs. Now that is pretty rare because the moon whips round the zodiac like a demented kid after too much chocolate. It changes sign every couple of days. Mercury and Venus aren't behind in the planet race, they shift signs every 2 weeks. Then you've got Mars plodding around the zodiac like he can't really be arsed. So when you put all that together, it starts to look pretty unlikely that all of your planets are going to end up in Aries and Taurus and nowhere else. It's not impossible, but if that's you, then you're not a cusp, you're a statistical anomaly. You should probably do the lottery. Let me know if you win, I can definitely help you spend that money. If you just happen to be born at the very moment of a complete astronomical alignment of all the planets, then congratulations, you are the one. You should probably start your own religion and take humanity into a new age, where everyone loves each other and income tax is abolished.
I reckon I might be the one.
No, you're a one. That's very different to being the one. If you turn out to be the one, then the world's in a lot of trouble. Anyway, I don't want to sound like I'm having a go at daily horoscopes. If you've got that much space in your column and your magazine sells 1 million copies, you're going to have a hard time going through everyone's individual chart for that month. Obviously they have to be very simplified due to these constraints. All I'm saying is that if you do take a look at your chart, you'll likely find the idea of cusp signs will become irrelevant.
So, Doctor, do you think I'll live a long and healthy life?
I doubt it. Mercury is in Uranus right now.
Oh, I don't go in for all that astrology stuff.
Neither do I. My thermometer just broke while I was examining you. Kirby's Quest. Kirby's Quest.
So that is my astrological explanation for why cusp signs feel real, even though they don't actually exist. At the end of the day, people don't like rigid labels. We're messy and nuanced and contradictory. Cusps feel compassionate because they seem to say that you're allowed to be more than one thing, and that instinct is bang on. But the irony is that astrology already says that. You're not a cusp, you're a whole chart. That complexity you feel is real. It just doesn't live where you've been told it does. So if you feel like you're more than one sign, that's because you are more than one sign. Have a look at your chart and you'll see that you're probably all over the zodiac. So rather than focusing on birthdays and arbitrary lists of characteristics, we should really be thinking about the whole picture. Just before I disappear, I want to give a quick shout out to DUNNERY Astrology. It's a newer YouTube channel that I've been slightly obsessed with lately. He really gets into the weeds with all the planets and positions, but he's also very laid back and down to earth. So if you like complex ideas explained in a way that you can immediately relate to your own life, then head over to DUNNERY Astrology. Anyway, we're just heading into Aquarius season, which means we've got another deep dive coming up next time. We'll be doing what we always do, unpacking the history, the symbolism, the psychology, and all the bits and pieces that make the sign feel alive. And in a funny way, that ties back to everything we've been talking about here. Astrology shouldn't be about squeezing people into boxes. It's about timing, location, and the exact moment when you arrived in the world. Which is why I want to leave you with this thought from Carl Jung. We are born at a given moment in a given place, and just like vintage wine, we have the qualities of the year and of the season in which we are born.
So it turns out that you're not a cusp, you're just complicated. And quite frankly, that's much more interesting. May your chart be precise and your cusp stay imaginary. Until next time.